Welcome back to another project on SwiftUI. In this one, we are going to create a recipe book app where we will create a simple app where you can view and add recipes. This project will cover like setting up the project, creating a basic UI, adding the state management, and displaying a list of recipes and adding new recipes. For simplicity, we'll just use names of the recipes and not add too much details. Maybe in future we can update it, but you can use custom names and add it to the recipe list. So that's what we will learn. We'll also use some structs and some advanced concepts in SwiftUI in this particular project. Let's start with a new project, app iOS next, and this one we call it recipe app. SwiftUI, perfect. Next, save it. And now that I have this app, the first thing we're going to start is we're going to create a struct. So let's store all the data in struct this time. Let's hide this so we have some space. Let's move it to the right, and this struct I'm going to call it recipe struct, which is an identifiable protocol. Let id is equal to uuid, so it's a unique identifier that it has, and it has another property which is a name which is of the type string. So we have that. Next, we're going to create the state property wrappers, which allows us to create mutable state within a SwiftUI view. Here, recipe is an array of recipe objects, and new recipe name is the string for the new recipe name input. So what we're going to do is right here, like how we did before. So we'll create a state private variable, and this is my recipes array, which contains, as I mentioned, the recipe or struct objects inside it. And for that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tuk and say recipe, and name is, let's say first one I'll call it spaghetti carbonara. Okay, next one I can create one with the name, let's say chicken curry. And the next one I can create, let's say beef kebabs. Okay, so these are the three recipes that I'm going to add. We're not going to add the entire details of the recipes for this project. As you saw from the initial screenshot, we'll just have the names just for simplicity of it. And then finally here I'll create a state parameter with a private variable new recipe name. So in to-do list we didn't do this, but this is a next version of what we do, where you can keep on adding items, custom items, instead of new task what we added in to-do list. But in this particular project we are gonna add a recipe name, custom recipe name that user provides. Now next I'm gonna get rid of all these things. I'm gonna start with the navigation view, and to this navigation view, inside this I'll add a vstack, my favorite one, and we'll add the list first inside it, list. And for this list I'm gonna add, for each item in the recipes, what I want to do is I want to go through each and every recipe in there and create a text of recipe dot name. So that's what I want, and that's what will show my all three recipes in there. Now for this I can add a so this is my list, and list I want to add a navigation title of let's call it recipes. So this adds on the top of that list. Next I'm going to create a horizontal stack right outside here. It's inside the vertical stack, but it's outside the list. I'm creating a horizontal stack where I will this time create a text field. Now this text field is where you can enter the new recipe name. I'm going to say new recipe, and then to that I'll say text will be let's write it in dollar new recipe name. That's the name. And then let me move up here, dot text field style, to give it a rounded border text field style. That's what I will give, and make sure this is a function, and I'll also give a basic padding to it. Once I've done with that, next to that text field I'm going to create a button. Now this button has an action, as we know about that by now. The action, I'll call it add recipe, which means I'll have to create a function for that, and inside that I'll say text would add a recipe. I'll give it a basic padding. I'll give it a background color of background color of blue or blue. I'll give a foreground color of dot white, and I'll give a corner radius, same stuff that we did before, of 8, and then this button can have a default padding to it, and that will look like this. Okay, it doesn't look like it's inside here, it's going outside, maybe because let's add the recipe and then we'll fix this thing. So right outside my body, I'm going to create function add recipe, and then what this does is, if not new recipe name is empty, so if recipe name is not empty, what I want to do is I want to create a new recipe with recipe object and give it the name whatever is the new recipe name. Okay, and then I will add this to the recipes array, and then I'll say new recipe name equal to empty, so clear it out. So that's the best option. So there you go. So now we have this item here. If I try to add, nothing will happen, but because I'm checking if it's empty or not. But if I try to add, let's say what is a good recipe, I'll say noodles, add, I can add ABCD, add. So you can keep on adding stuff to this, and this is our basic uh, app, which we created a struct, in this case a recipe object, and then we added these, created these recipe items are added in the state recipes, and then create a state variable for new recipe name, which keeps track of every time a new recipe is added, and it will accordingly add to the list of it. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Thank you.